Well, good evening, everybody, and it is a great honor to be with you tonight as the chairman of IRI, and I think we're going to have a great awards ceremony, and then my understanding, we're all together, we're going to go out, have a cocktail after. Is that right, Dan? Is that okay? So we're going to make this a fun night as well as a serious night. But I do want to thank Dan Twining for his exceptional, energized leadership. How about a round of applause for him? Doing a great job. And he already mentioned the IRI board, so many of my incredible Senate colleagues for being here tonight, and so many of all of you, supporters of IRI, who have made this such a successful evening. Now tonight, as Dan mentioned, we're going to celebrate democracy and its heroes, and thank those who work across the globe to counter one of the 21st century's most significant challenges that we're seeing, and that is the rise of powerful authoritarian governments. The heroes we honor come from different continents, hold different religious beliefs, celebrate different customs from different cultures, but they have one thing in common. They believe that every individual should control his or her own destiny, and all people have a right to self-governance. That's what we believe. So tonight we honor the people of Cuba, who courageously took to the streets in defiance of a brutal dictatorship that has ruled by fear for over 60 years. We honor the Burmese people who stood up and demonstrated to the world that a military junta cannot be allowed to attack and replace a democratically elected government. We honor the people of Lithuania, a nation that came to the aid of its neighbors, the Belarusians who had been protesting the criminal and corrupt Lukashenko regime. And we honor those who directly confronted the global pandemic, threatening their personal and political freedom. Over the past year, these and others have rallied to break the chains of oppression in their countries and to provide a model, a light, in some of the darkest places in the world. I'd like to say a few words about another one of these lights, Taiwan, whose democracy is being threatened with extinction by an authoritarian government of immense power, ambition, and appetite. Some see the defense of democratic values in places like Taiwan as a luxury that we cannot afford in an age of sharpened geopolitical competition. I reject that view. IRI rejects that view. Importantly, American law, particularly the Taiwan Relations Act, rejects that view, which, among other things, this law states, quote, "The United States will consider any effort to determine the future of Taiwan by other than peaceful means a threat to the peace and security of the Western Pacific area and an issue of grave concern to the United States." The free world cannot be neutral in the contest between freedom and authoritarianism that is underway throughout the world right now, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. American alliances and power and ingenuity helped build a world that provided more freedom and prosperity to more people than ever before. In fact, United States democracy, bolstered by a strong military, has done more to liberate humankind from oppression and tyranny, literally hundreds of millions of people, than any other force in human history. And as Americans, that's something we can all be proud of. The Chinese Communist Party knows exactly what it wants to accomplish: to make the world safe for its authoritarian government, to export its dictatorship model to other countries, to separate America from our democratic allies, and to erode U.S. global leadership. A world governed by Xi Jinping's totalitarian vision would be a world unsafe for America and our friends, and certainly unsafe for democracy. That's why Taiwan is so central to the future of the free world. It is a thriving, prosperous Chinese democracy that holds free elections and in which power is bounded by the law. For that reason, it threatens the CCP's central premise that one man ruling in perpetuity by crushing all dissent knows what's best for 1.4 billion people. The Chinese Communist Party has already crushed Hong Kong, once a bastion of liberty. And I don't like to say it, but it's true. The free world barely raised a finger in protest. Should America and the world stand by as China does something similar to Taiwan, a peaceful democracy of 25 million people who voted for an entirely different future, that would not simply undermine the security of the Western Pacific, as the Taiwan Relations Act says. A violent military takeover of Taiwan by the CCP would be a sea change in how the world is ordered. It would change the 21st century's history in a way that the guns of August of 1914 changed the 20th century. It's important to say this. Taiwan is therefore not some peripheral sideshow in terms of global great power competition. It is the front line between freedom and tyranny, like West Berlin was during the height of the Cold War. It is also an issue that has been weaved in and out of the careers of so many professionals and the people here, countless Americans, including my own. Over 25 years ago in 1995 and 96, I was a Marine infantry officer deployed to the Taiwan Strait as part of a Marine amphibious task force in 2 U.S. carrier strike groups, all in response to the Chinese Communist Party's aggressive military provocations on the eve of presidential elections in Taiwan. The third Taiwan Strait crisis, that period is now called. This was an important demonstration of American commitment and resolve to an emerging democracy and partner that is still remembered today. 20 years later, on a Codel to Taiwan, led by the senator we recognize and celebrate tonight, and it's great having Cindy here, Senator John McCain, I was asked by the newly elected president whether I'd ever been to Taiwan. It took me a few seconds to answer, and I said, well, yes, Madam President, I have been to Taiwan before, but never on land. More recently, I was part of another bipartisan demonstration of American commitment and resolve when I traveled to Taiwan with Democrat Senators Tammy Duckworth and Chris Coons to provide American vaccines, close to 1 million, for the Taiwanese people in the face of the Chinese Communist Party's aggressive attempts to prevent the citizens of Taiwan from receiving this life-saving medicine. American commitment and resolve for Taiwan has been part of our law, heritage, trade, economics, and military deployments for decades, and it should be for decades to come. So now is the time, particularly at this wonderful celebration of IRI, for all democracies to recognize they need to get off the fence, for the free world to stand together to make sure that the authoritarian aggression we are seeing will fail in the 21st century just as it ultimately failed in the 20th century. Our values of freedom, innovation, individual rights, and openness are the values that the Chinese Communist Party is most afraid of. We must be ready as democracies to defend these values or risk a world increasingly governed by autocracy, surveillance, aggression, and conflict. Let me conclude with a quote from the great President Ronald Reagan, the National Endowment and IRI, Father about freedom. Here's what he said, and I'm sure many of you have heard it. Freedom is a fragile thing. It is never more than 1 generation away from extinction. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only once to a people, and those in world history who have known freedom and then lost it have never known it again. We have so many allies in IRI's just cause. All of you here tonight, certainly, and it's not just the citizens of our fellow democracies, it's literally billions of additional allies around the world. Citizens on every continent, in every country, including China, chafing for greater freedom, dignity, and individual liberty.